The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Football fans, the time is now.
Give me a hell yeah!
For the football show you never knew you wanted. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Broken Helmet.
And coming to you live on tape on this Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025. It is the best NFL show you have never heard of. It is the Broken Helmet. And to get in touch with the show, you can reach us at brokenhelmetshow@gmail.com or at Broken Helmet Pod on X or Instagram or Facebook or YouTube. But primarily, we end up using X. So, week 3 is in the books, and it was a crazy week as you had multiple games with come-from-behind wins, games that came down to the wire, losses that turned into wins, and bets that went one way to the other, including my own bets, because as I stated last week in the Let's Bet Gambling show, I decided to try to get on the board because because this is always the case, because teasers had been hitting at such a high clip. Even though I hate teasers because the odds that you get on the modern day teases suck. I hate them, but I did them because I said, with all of these legs coming in and with so many that I have charted that have come in, maybe this is the way to try to turn things around and get on the board and get positive. And so I did. And it was my number one invested bet, which was a 3-team tease. But on top of that, I also had another, I think it was an alt line parlay. We'll get into it in a bit, but I had another complimentary bet lined up. 2 of those, I think 3 in total could have cashed with the Ravens on Monday night, a game that I was pretty damn sure of was going to be the Ravens at home against the Lions. And I could not have been more wrong. I mean, it turned money into just straight duty. It was unbelievable. As I was watching it and just watching the Lions chop up the Ravens defense and saying to myself, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe this was yet the 3rd week in a row that another one of my, I've got a read on this team turned into just straight dog shit. And unfortunately for the Ravens, and this is going to be another year where these losses could just come to bite them in the ass once again. And instead of getting a home game in the playoffs, in a divisional game and a conference championship, they're going to end up having to go on the road. And if they do, they're going to look back at games like the Sunday night open week 1 opener against the Bills, like this game here against the Lions. And they're going to say, damn, what it coulda, shoulda, right? Those are games that we should have won. We fumbled. We let the Bills get all these points scored in the 4th quarter against the Lions. Our defense decides to not show up for our home game. Like, what the fuck is going on? What are we doing? This is not how you line up a successful Super Bowl run, is pissing away these opportunities that you had in the bag. But yet again, here you go, early season Ravens doing it once again. Now, last year, we talked about this in week 1, but last year, week 1, they have that tough one against the Chiefs, but then they give that game away against the Raiders, and here you see the same stuff. Anyway, that all comes to bite me because had they won, that would have been such a great shot to the bankroll. Wasn't to happen. My brother on the flip side, he ended up being positive yet again. So he, through 3 weeks, has been fantastic. Me, completely different story. But we'll get into that by looking at the standings right now to look at where the teams are and what we're looking at right now in the NFL. So Here are the standings as they are through 3 weeks. At the top, we'll go through AFC and the NFC. Real quick, you got Chargers, Colts, Bills all at 3-0. And I think that we could say that those 3 teams are probably pretty comfortable up there. I'm going to put the Ravens up in that top tier as well, even though they're 1-2, because the way that they played, I can't not see them fixing some of the issues, turning it around in the, from here on out, and getting into the playoffs and being a strong team. I just don't know what's going to happen with their playoff situation, because do these games cost them? Does starting off 1-2 cost them a home game? I don't know. But if you want to go AFC top tier, Chargers, Bills, Ravens, and crazy to say the Colts, because after rewatching at least the condensed game, because I didn't crunch the 22 tape on Daniel Jones, but I did end up rewatching the Colts to see exactly what everybody was talking about. He looks good, and the Colts look good, and I want to see more of them. But through 3 games and the performance that they had, I don't think you can discredit them from that top tier. So throw them up there. Then you have this hovering below. I'm going to end up putting the Chiefs, even though they're down at 1-2, and I'm going to put the Broncos, who are also at 1-2. Broncos are very questionable to me, but if they can just fix Bo Nix and get him to play average to a little bit above average ball, they would be in a way better position. Bo Nix has had 2 horrific weeks. Horrific weeks. And as a result, he's cost them 2 wins in both of those. So if they can fix him a little bit, I think that the Broncos do have some future success there to be had in the 2025 season. Now, let's just go to the bottom of the barrel, because there's plenty of those. The 3 biggies out of the AFC, Titans, Texans, and Dolphins, all are complete garbage. The Jets, look, they could have won their home opener. They also probably could have won last week. Was not meant to happen. But I don't think the Jets are in the same position as the Dolphins, Texans, and Titans. The Titans right now, and if you watch You Better You Bet, Nick Costas went off on Callahan today as being the worst coach in the history of the NFL, I think it was. But there are definitely issues now in Tennessee with the second-year head coach. Things are not coming together. Cam Ward, obviously, the new rookie quarterback, has not performed well, but there's a lot of other variables contributing to Tennessee's awful start here. The Texans, they did not piece together a line before the season. Everybody said it was an awful line. They traded away their best offensive line talent in Tunsil, and they obviously didn't have some kind of trick up their sleeve, because the line is just as shitty as everybody thought it was going to be. So what were you doing going into the season, thinking that you were going to be able to put that line out there and protect Stroud and have any kind of success? It was fictitious, whatever thoughts you might have had. It was not based in reality. And they are just stuck with some decent skill position players, a great defense, and a terrible team. And I don't know if you can do anything to fix that offensive line and turn around the season. I don't think that it'll be this bad, but right now they're awful. And then the Dolphins, whatever. The Dolphins were happy not to have lost by 50 points. They were happy that they covered. That's what they were. Mike McDaniel was happy his team covered. Congratulations, but you still suck. As for the NFC, I'll put at the top here, I am going to go Lions, Rams, Eagles, Seahawks, and Packers. I'm not going to put the 49ers up there yet. We'll talk about them in a hot second. But the Lions obviously now have had 2 fantastic weeks, are sitting at 2-1. But they just went up against the Ravens, who, even though they do have what looks to be a very average to below average defense, I mean, terrible on Monday night. They've had 2 weeks that piece together that you would say, you know what? If you're talking about cream of the crop, they're probably up there. I'm putting the Rams, because the Rams should have beat the Eagles, right? And if not for a crazy blocked field goal turned into a touchdown, which turned into a cover, I mean, just nutso in Philadelphia getting that win. Probably one of the cooler home games to have been at in the past 5 years, per se. I mean, it's just a regular season game, but man, to see a block kick get returned for a touchdown at the very end of the game to lock it up when you were going to lose, it's like, wow, would have been cool. So I'm going to put the Rams in there, even though they lost to the Eagles. They kind of bested the Eagles, and now that's twice that the Rams probably should have won against the Eagles in the past their past two meetings. The last one being that playoff game where if it wasn't for the snow, I think they definitely would have won. So Eagles I'll put in right behind the Rams. Their offense is really lackluster right now. Question marks abound about the passing game, question marks in the secondary. The Eagles do not look like a strong defending Super Bowl championship team right now. However, it's still early. Plenty of time for them to patch things up, and there are a lot of core components there. Not to mention, I mean, they're 3-0. So you got to put them up there. I'm going to put them there with the Rams and the Lions. Seahawks and Packers, I don't like look, the Seahawks are 2-1. I hate Sam Darnold, but much like Daniel Jones, you rewatch the games and he looks all right. And I like Mike McDonald, and everything right now in Seattle seems to be working. Now they beat up on a Saints team. Who cares, right? But they did beat they did beat the Steelers. And watching what the team looks like right now, you have to be more than happy if you're a Saints fan. So put them there. And then the Packers, obviously, they have a little hiccup this week. They're on the road. It was versus the Browns. Mad Dog Russo was talking about Love, and he said, look, you can't be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL if you can't go on the road and beat that Browns team in Cleveland. I tend to agree with him, but I think the modern day NFL is a little bit different. A lot of teams could lose that game because the Browns are decent. They have a fantastic defense, terrible offense, good coach. And so their defense put together enough to stop the Packers and then end up netting that win. So for the Packers, give them the mulligan. We'll see what happens. They've got a lot to fix in the wide receiver room, which is just an outright mess right now. And I don't know how you're going to be able to, have such a successful run with such a shitty wide receiver room. But maybe Golden comes around. Maybe they're able to piece something together. Who knows? Again, it's early. It's the unofficial preseason in the NFL. So I like them. So that's who I'm putting toward the top. One more team in the NFC than the AFC. Underneath there, the second tier, I'm going to throw in the 49ers, Bucks, and the Vikings. 49ers are undefeated at 3-0. I'm just not quite sold on the team yet. And now they lose Nick Bosa, who is their best defensive player. You have to somehow replace his production, which is going to be difficult. Not to mention he's kind of like the heart and soul of his team. Those intangibles that, I don't know if they really mean anything. But the 49ers are better with Bosa than without. You had the quarterback issues. You got wide receiver issues. So they're a 3-0 team, questionable 3-0 team. But look, they came from behind in the end versus the Cardinals. Congratulations to them after they blew it with a terrible holding call in the end zone, resulting in a safety. That's how they would have lost, which is crazy to think about it. But again, it didn't matter. They came back, kicked the field goal, won it, moved to 3-0. Bucks, I never was a fan of Baker Mayfield. I wasn't when he was drafted. Kind of am still not. But you watch him and you go, you know what? The fucking guy does play. He rises to the occasion. He enjoys being in that spot a little bit. And, he doesn't look terrible doing so. They've got, if they can get Mike Evans healthy, and eventually when they get, what's his face back, the other receiver who's out, and I forgot it for now, so I'm just going to go past it. When they get everybody back, they probably will be pretty solid. Now, they've lost some pieces for the year. They lost the D lineman last week. And, injuries are a pain, right? They're not easy to fill once you get the season started, especially so early in the season, right? But, regardless, the Bucks were okay, and I'm going to put them in this lower tier. And then the Vikings have got to figure out what's going on with the quarterback, obviously. Should they do that? Brian Flores and the defense right now are just scheming the shit out of people. If you watch a lot of content creation on the net, you'll see, I forget who it was, but there's been several people who have pointed towards some of the different coverages that Flores is throwing in there and how he's disguising them and moving them and making all-out blitzes look into like too high safety looks. And it's, for people that crunch tape and know way more schematically than it's a fun thing to watch. Now, the offense, they obviously have pieces. Jordan Mason has had a nice week 3 in replacement of Aaron Jones. They obviously have Justin Jefferson. They get Addison back this week. I believe it's this week, right? He was done with 3 weeks, so this is the 4th week, so he's back. And so if they get solid quarterback play, whether it's out of McCarthy down the line or whether it's with Wentz now, they would be obviously a team that could have some success in the postseason. So look toward the bottom of the barrel then. And it's just, it's like the usual suspects, man. Saints, Giants, Panthers, Falcons, Cowboys, I'll throw in there because the Cowboys are now a mess with CeeDee Lamb being out, 4 weeks is what they're thinking about. And with no defense of note, what are you going to do with an offense without CeeDee Lamb, who's your best player, and then no defense to boot? The Saints, I don't blame them. Look, their quarterback pieced out right before the season started because he decided his shoulder was too banged up. And so now they're making it up on the fly. I still don't know why Kellen Moore took that job. Shame on him. I would not have went to the Saints, but there he is. He's just going to have to figure out something to do with that team, at least this year, and then make it through and look to rebuild into next year, seeing if they have anything in a quarterback. And if not, how they're going to replace that position. And then there's the Giants. The Giants, I don't know what you want to do. What do you want to do and say with the Giants? There's not much that you could say. There's not. It's just a terrible organization. Probably one of the worst run organizations in all of sports. Definitely right now, the worst run organization in the National Football League. I pieced together before the start of the season, I had put this, and I forget what I was going to use it for, but I printed out the past 10 years of all the teams and their wins per year and then the total. And the bottom teams, here are the bottom 4 teams. The Browns, the Giants, the Jets, and the Jags. Total wins, those 4 teams are all under 60 wins. So over the past 10 years, they have under 60 wins apiece. How is that even possible? How is that even possible? You look at these numbers and you just start thinking to yourself,
this was an affront to my senses.
What am I looking at? What am I looking at? And here, going to the Giants and drilling down just a little bit, this is the worst part of it all. Of those 4 teams, again, Browns, Jets, Giants, Jags, here are the number of seasons that these teams have had over 6 wins. That's the bar. 6 wins. So you have to have 7 or more. The Cleveland Browns, over the past 10 years, have had 57 total wins. They have had 5 seasons with more than 6 wins. The New York Jets have had 56 wins over the 10 years. They have had 4 seasons with more than 6 wins. The Jacksonville Jaguars, with 55 wins, which is the lowest of them all, have had 3 seasons with more than 6 wins. The New York Giants, with a total of 57 wins over the past 10 years, have had 2, count them, 2 seasons with more than 6 wins. That's it. You had the 11-win season in 2016, And then you had a 9-win season, which was Daboll's first year in 2022. And that is it. 2. You want to get even worse? The Jets and the Giants of those teams, well, actually, no, and the Jags, they all have one double-digit win total in the past 10 years. The Jets in 2015, the Giants in 2016, and then the Jaguars in 2017. Amazing enough, the Browns had 11 wins in 2020 and 2023. So there you go. The New York Giants, for rifling through how many GMs and how many coaches and doing this thing all over again, and now in week 4, going to Jackson Dart in a desperation move, have mustered up 2 seasons with more than 6 wins and 1 double-digit win total in 10 years. It just doesn't get any worse than that. And so those are the worst teams in the NFC. I've talked about the worst teams in the AFC, but we really are concerned with the best teams in the league. And you want to put the tops, I'm going to go Chargers, Bills, and Lions. Those are the 3 right now that I think that are above all the rest. I think the Rams are really close in there as well, because I think the Rams have played really bad. You want to talk about the other side, who are going to be the first coaches fired? It's got to be Daboll and McDaniel. Obviously, I think if McDaniel got blown out more than he did last week, where they covered, then he would have been gone. He survived, so here we are. Daboll on the other end, I think that if they host the Chargers here, they went to Dart. Dart was always the wild card. I think, my personal opinion was, I think both the organization and the coach and the GM wanted to save Dart for the end of the year, because from management standpoint, they don't want to throw away what could be their sales piece for the 2026 season. You throw in Dart in the last couple of games and he looks good, and then you say, oh, this is what we got for next year. Come buy all of our shit, buy all the jerseys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you keep them and you sandbag them. From the GM and the coach's perspective, they want to keep him on the shelf too, because when they need it toward the end of the season, similar to the ownership, they want to be able to throw him in there and then watch him light up the field if he's got that kind of talent, and then say, oh, look, there's our guy. That's what we've been missing. We've been missing a quarterback, and we have them, and we both deserve to come back next year. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. I shouldn't say unfortunately. It's not unfortunately. But the team has performed so poorly through 3 weeks that the decision was, we are going to find out if this kid is good or if he sucks right now. And the risk you run putting him in now is that if he sucks, there is no hope for next year whatsoever. It will be a thorough wash of everything. If Dart goes in there and he looks terrible, he looked great in the preseason, but the preseason, you don't play anybody, right? If he looks terrible in the regular season, they're all fucked. Well, with the exception of the Maras, because the Maras are owner of a $10 billion team, and they'll be there forever. Nobody's going to force them to sell. You can't force them to sell. The fans could, by just not showing up anymore and just refusing to go, but we all know that fans don't do that. So the Maras are fine, but everybody else is fucked. And Shane would be gone, and Daboll will be gone, and the fans will just be miserable, because they'll be waiting for who's going to run this team going forward. And then what are we going to do at quarterback? Because Dart stinks. Hope that doesn't happen, but that's why I found it odd that they would have played Dart so early in the season, because it just always felt like it was a late season move. So to go to him this early just seems so desperate. So again, Daboll, McDaniel, first coach is out when push comes to shove, depending on when that happens. I'll say one coach that could be a one and done, because this has now become a thing. It used to be 3 years unless you really stunk, and then you got a one and done. So you had Pierce last year, one and done. Gerard Mayo last year, one and done. Raheem Morris could also be a one and done. They grab him off the scrap heap. He didn't have success with his last run with Tampa Bay, and through 3 games, Atlanta looks horrific, including an offer. Let me say that again, an offer against the Carolina Panthers. Like, what? The Panthers, Carolina Panthers. And so he could be a one and done coach as well. And so that's but they wouldn't get rid of him intra-season. So you're talking intra-season, you're talking about Dable and McDaniel. So now the question becomes, how did we do with our gambling? So that's where we're going to go next as we pull up these sheets here. And you'll have to just bear with me as I get the sheets up and running. Like I mentioned, we are now moving over to YouTube to include a visual element to the podcast. And so I am using Evie Mux, and as I try to get a feel for how to weave in and out of all the different tabs and the windows, I bore the shit out of those who are actually on the audio broadcast of the show. But the reason why is because I have to pull up things that look like this. And here we go. So here are the general stats, and to run through those. Last week, the favorites ended up winning. They were victorious over the dogs 11-5. In regard to teasers, the favorites were good for 13-3. The dogs were 10-6. Now, of the dogs' 5 wins, 3 of those were outright wins. I should say, of the dog covers, 3 of those 5 were outright wins. Those teams were the Carolina Panthers, the Cleveland Browns, who are both home dogs, and then the Detroit Lions, who are on the road, obviously, and screwed up my parlays and my tees. Now, the over-unders were split 8-8. As for the teased, they were both 10-6 and 9-7. So nothing really big with the overs and the unders compared to the previous weeks, where you saw slants one way and then the other. Home dogs here were 2-3. The 2 teams that won were at Carolina and Cleveland. Like I mentioned earlier, they were outright wins. Big road favorites were 2-2. Big road favorites defined by spreads of more than 4.5. Or 4.5 or more from the opposing team. That was Indianapolis and Kansas City. Both were on the road, big favorites, and ended up winning. Halftime leads were 12-2. There were 2 teams that ended up losing their halftime lead, one being the Rams and that crazy come-from-behind win from Philadelphia, and then Green Bay obviously losing in the end to a field goal from the Brownies. Trifecta bets, where the Sharps tickets and money pool are all on one side, were 2-2. The 2 teams that were victorious there were Seattle and the Chargers. Everybody was all over those, and they ended up winning. And then pros versus Joes were 1-5 in favor of the Joes. So the Joes, who have not had a great season so far, but were victorious this week when going up against the pros, and that is also defined as when the money line and the sharps are on one side and the tickets are on the other. So now, what about our wagers? So this is what we had done in week 3. I will start with Chris because he was the one that was victorious. He ended up cashing in on his Chargers bet, and then he also cashed in on his Kansas City -2.5 and Detroit money line bet. And that one was a nice hit for $600. So the Chargers, he had put 250, pulled back 500. The KC Detroit parlay was 150 for 600. So he will pull back 11,000. Now, he did have some tickets that didn't cash, and that'll come off the top there. That was Cincinnati and Houston, a money line bet. That was no good. That cost him 100. He had 2 parlays here, alt lines, that didn't come in. Green Bay and Atlanta screwed up his one, and then Dallas and Arizona cost him his other one. So in total, he ended up giving back, of the 1,100, another $450. And as for me, what do you want to talk about? I mean, my one winning bet was Pittsburgh, Jacksonville, Seattle, Chicago, and Kansas City all put together with either money lines or low spreads. They all came through. They were good. That was 25 for 304. So, dollars to donuts, it was a nice return, but I only put $25 on it. I didn't put 100. That would have been a really nice hit, but I didn't, because I spread my bets out here in that one, obviously with 5 legs. Why are you going to put, $200-300 in a 5-leg parlay? Because it's not a real good investment of your money. But I did take a $25 flyer and it hit, and so I got 304. Everything else was just nothing. It was zeros across the board. First one was Seattle, Kansas City, and then Baltimore. That one didn't work out because Baltimore blew the Monday night game. And I'm just sitting there and I'm just like, what do you... That is not how this works. Exactly. That is not how this works. You do not have a Monday night home opener, if I'm not mistaken, and blow it to a Lions team that has an entire rotating staff this year, including both the offensive defensive coordinator, especially when you're the home team who has all the same coordinators as last year. But again, that is not how that works unless I bet it in a tease. So Baltimore cost me that one. And then I tacked on another end of that. It didn't matter, but Green Bay cost me. Then I had a 3-team tease, 3-team alt spread that ended up costing me because Green Bay couldn't get it done. San Francisco couldn't get it done for 2 of my other ones. And then it was Baltimore and San Francisco in the other one. So in total, when you look at it, what I really got shot with was Baltimore, Green Bay, and San Francisco. So 3 teams that ended up costing me a significant amount of money. I would have lived with Baltimore at least winning, because had Baltimore won, it would have pulled in my tease bet. It would have also have pulled in my money line bet. And so that would have added to the 304 an extra 1,400, and it would have been a nice return, but it was not meant to be. So, again, the issues are I really like Baltimore being teased down, and I really like Green Bay getting teased down. San Francisco, I did think was going to win handily. I thought that was good. I put them with the Chargers as my 2-team parlay, and I had $100 on that as well because I thought that was going to cash. I put Chicago in there. That would have been nice too because that ended up hitting for 3 teams. So, while my brother ended up, padding his bets nicely by having his straight Chargers bet and then having this Kansas City Detroit money line bet, I was just... this has happened 3 weeks in a row where I invested too much on the teams that I thought I had good reads on. And here, I'm not going to say San Francisco as much as Baltimore and Green Bay, I thought teased down were going to be surefire winners. So where does that leave us performance-wise? Well, as you will see here, that for the week, Chris ends up pulling in 1,100. I ended up pulling in 304, weighed against what we wagered. I was a net negative. He was a net positive. He was good for about 300. What is that? $250. And then I ended up being short about 400, give or take. So on the year, his bankroll is now up to $10,060 for a margin, and this does not even include the season bets. So should he hit some season bets down the road, that'll just add to this. The margin for him from his starting bankroll just in the regular season, which was 9,000, is now up just under 12% for the year. And as for me, I am down about 8.5%. So I really could have used those wins this week to try to pull me out of this, but unfortunately it was not meant to be. And so I am down about 8.5%. My brother is doing phenomenal, almost at 12%. All of our survivors have hit so far. Pitt, Arizona, Seattle for me, and Arizona, Baltimore, Buffalo for him. So that's where we stand with all of our wagers. And so now, we'll bounce and we'll start looking at the, I don't even know where we want to go here. I mean, gambling wise, look, I think my frustration is coming from the fact that I have had so close to positive weekends. And each week I've kind of tweaked a little something different, trying to go on trends and trying to correct things that I lost, the week before. Mistakes, bad reads, bad betting design, whatever it might be. And unfortunately, again, this week I throw the dice because, like I said, I don't like teases. I didn't want to do the teases, but I did it anyway. And then it comes back to bite me in the ass because it was a heavy investment and that ended up going kerplunk. So, what further aggravates me and adds to that frustration is if you look at, and we'll go here, this is what I brought up before, but if you go to my little weekly sheet here, and I don't know why I can't keep it up, but now I just pause. I shouldn't say that. That's what she said. That's what I should have said. But if you look at the weekly sheet that I have put up here, you will see this is what I sit with every Friday. And this is the show sheet. This is how I line out all of the bets. But if you look at the bottom there, and I will articulate this so that people, and there I go with articulate again. That's another winner for me. I say articulate. But if you look at the teaser legs that I liked, you will see that I liked the following. I liked the Bills. I liked the Packers. I liked the Bucks, the Seahawks, Chiefs, Ravens, Lions, Giants, Texans, Rams, and Patriots. Of those teaser legs that I liked, if you see the ones that are circled, those are the ones that I really liked. And I really liked the Bucks. I really liked the Seahawks. I really liked the Chiefs. And those all hit. And then I really liked the Packers, and that did not. And I really liked the Ravens, and that did not. But everywhere else, the only other team that didn't come in was the Giants. So of all those teases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I was 8-3 on the teases. And I just didn't pick the right ones. And that's the frustrating part, is that it's all lined up. And for whatever reason, I ended up selecting the wrong ones. And the Ravens won again. I gassed on it because I was more than happy taking that line on Monday night, especially when it was teased. I didn't have it at 5.5. Everything that I had on was money line or with the points, and it was a wrong read. That defense is not good. I thought second year with Orr at the helm, they would have been able to make some adjustments. I thought Starks added to the secondary was going to be good, but they really got pushed around. They really were not strong. They just looked terrible. And I would say probably on the year, they have not looked great either. So I don't know what's going to happen toward the end of the year with that, because if that defense is really that putrid, and this is just not a 3-week ramp up period, they're going to have significant issues at the end of the year, especially when you play teams that are going to have good offensive production, like the Bills, right? And like the Chargers. I don't know how you really think you're going to be able to compete, especially if these losses cost you home field advantage. So, questions for the Ravens, who I really liked going into the season, based just on a couple of losses and how they looked. But again, things change so quick in the NFL, especially when you're talking about week 3, right? So, as for fantasy, right? Fantasy is another route to go here, and it has also been pretty popular. Let me just, what am I doing here? Let's get off of this again. Here's where I blow it for the listeners at home and people watching, that they're like, "What the hell is this guy doing? He's just fumbling around, pulling his pud." And it's like, yeah, no, I am. But I'm trying to figure out what to do here with EV Mux and how best to use it. And it's still learning process for me, unfortunately. So, but here we go. Here we pull up the fantasy football lineups. Well, not lineups, but the averages. Again, I am going to use the scoring system I use for my own league that I run. It is a PPR league. There's some caveats to the quarterback scoring, but overall, quarterbacks obviously toward the top. This has been the trend forever. And we'll rip through each one of the positions. And then after that, you see wide receivers, but a lot of running backs. And so when you look at the quarterbacks themselves, because they're obviously toward the top, so let's get rid of everybody else and just sift out trends that we see. Look, Jackson and Allen, obviously you knew we're going to be at the top. Caleb Williams is throwing up points here. Many Chicago Bears fans hope that is reflective of Ben Johnson and his new offense. Indiana Jones just rocking and rolling there under Shane Stitchen, who Jones is killing me. I thought Stitchen was a joke. I actually posted something on X earlier in the season when he was announcing the captains, and it was just such a dorky, uninspired meeting. I was just like, this is not a head coach. And so this is going to be his last gig as soon as he's fired. I thought they were going to go 0-3. Here they are 3-0. Daniel Jones is making him and Daniel Jones look fantastic. And I look like the fool. No, I mean, I don't look like a fool. Nobody gives a shit, what I say anyway. But in my own mind, because I think I'm a winner, but I'm not. I'm right now, I'm not winning at all. So Daniel Jones up there. Goff obviously has a big night. Jalen Hurts, he's a high draft pick up top there. Mariota, throw that out. Herbert was picked up late. May was kind of average, but if you scroll down, the bigger hits to the fantasy world is going to be players like Jaden Daniels, injured, not playing. Patrick Mahomes was drafted up high, and he's, at 17 points, comparatively speaking, to the 32 from Jackson and the 25 from Allen, was not a good investment. And as you go down, obviously, I just mentioned Mahomes, but further down the list, and he's injured to boot, is going to be your boy Joe Burrow. So he's on the IR, but even before, he only had the 7 points. Now, I don't know if that 7 points include the injury, that game that he had. We'll just pull it up here and I'll tell you right out of the gate. So he had the 7 in game 1 and 6 in game 2. That was only for 7 for 13 before he went out. So, but Burrow drafters are obviously, quite pissed with the events of the season. And obviously, if they stacked them, now you're like, oh, what did I do? Penix has been an outright disaster as well. Cam Ward has been a disaster. So looking up top here and you're looking at the people that you're happy with. If you're a Jackson drafter, Allen, Williams, Jones, very happy. Goff, you're happy as well. Hurts, you're a little frustrated. You're expecting more, but, he had a big 31-point outing last week. Justin Herbert fans are very happy because you got him at a discount later on. Baker Mayfield was drafted a little bit high, but he's probably where he should be. And then you get into everybody else. So running backs, look, these have performed way better than I thought. We'll look at the 20-point scores and hires. You have Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, up to James Cook. James Cook with a great value. Christian McCaffrey, who people were high on him coming into the year, and he has done nothing other than perform. And then you have Jonathan Taylor at the top. Taylor had slipped a little bit before the draft. So through 3 games, those that drafted him, pretty happy. When you start going down, there are obviously some surprises. Javonte Williams, David Montgomery coming in there and scoring as much as they have. Travis Etienne, same thing. Bucky Irvin's down a little bit from where you thought he would be. The rookies are the question marks because as you go down here and you look at some of the players that are out, obviously Jaylen Warren has locked up the starting running back and the number 1 role there in Pittsburgh, and Caleb Johnson is just out. And then obviously Henry down here, that is, but we're talking about the rookies right now. Scatterbo gets in there first game this week. He had a nice production there. And really, Omarion Hampton, you were expecting a lot more out of him. I mean, 12 is not terrible, but you were expecting more. And then where is Trayvon Henderson? Where is he? Oh, there he is, all the way down there. I mean, below the legs of Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty's another rookie that just has not been great. And then I don't even know. Harvey's not even on the page. That's how bad he is. So I think the one trend that has blown up in a lot of fantasy footballer drafts so far is the fact that a lot of people were big on the rookie running backs, and the rookie running backs have been nothing short of awful. I guess Hampton is the best of the bunch. And even at that, Hampton's at, 12.5 points per average per game. So, I mean, what are we doing? Compare those to the wide receiver and the tight ends. You're looking at Nakua, Brown, Odunze, all above 20 points per game. Odunze obviously coming out of nowhere to take over the number 1 role in Chicago, at least through 3 games. he was drafted with the hope that he would be that. I mean, obviously, people knew Ben Johnson, knew his offense, knew what he had done in Detroit. I think a lot of people, including myself, thought that player might be more. There was a bunch of people that were talking about Odunze going into the season. I think I want to say that I heard more and more. My read was more. It was not. It was not Odunze. I was wrong, as Odunze has been the man and has looked good doing so. So those three are over 20 points. Now, going back to the running backs, you got 3 wide receivers. Meanwhile, here you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're seeing more production out of the running back position than the wide receivers. So again, it kind of puts a little bit more value on the wide receiver position, since a lot of leagues play 3. And this year, it just looks like there is a lot of mediocrity right now throughout the wide receiver position, where, running backs now are scoring points. Kind of a throwback to maybe like 3-4 years ago, when running backs had a little bit of a renaissance. So we'll see how it plays out here. Obviously, there are question marks abound from the wide receiver position. You see a Buka here, Emeka Buka, and he's doing great. He'll continue to do good because Mike Evans has fallen to injury. He's going to be out, 3 to 4 weeks, something around those lines. So you see players like that, a rookie, perform. Zay Flowers has a couple of good weeks, but then he awful with a three ball in week 3. Cortland Sutton finally coming around. People were shit talking him for the first couple of weeks. Jake Ferguson as a tight end is getting some points here. So there's a lot of mix mosh out of the wide receiver position through the 3 weeks of the NFL season, to the point that I think it's probably making a lot of people uneasy as to what did they actually put together. Justin Jefferson, I'm not worried about him, but I don't know what his ceiling might be with that kind of quarterback play, but I would imagine that he rises up these ranks. CeeDee Lamb hurt again. There's question marks everywhere because it's just not playing out through the first couple of weeks as you thought. AJ Brown all the way in the basement there of the first page, where with a 10 measly 10 average going through the first 3. That's just what is going on. And then defensive players, I won't spend too much time because not a lot of people do IDP, but you're looking at defensive ends having some go at it here in the beginning of the season. Brian Burns and Byron Young at the tops of this scoring system, and this scoring system is primarily point per tackle and then 6 points per sack. So that's where you see some of these elevated numbers. The linebackers that you would expect to see, Bobby Wagner is still getting it done at 50 years old, or however old he is now. Roquan Smith, Myles Garrett, you see up here, another D end. Rashawn Gary getting by with the addition of Micah Parsons, taking some pressure off him. So he's been able to get some quarterback sacks there, throwing onto his point total. And again, your Fred Warners, Harold Landry, getting it done. He's always there. Nobody ever talks about him in IDP, but you always pick him up and you throw him in your line back, and he always gets you points, doing so again this year. So, like I said, a lot of familiar names and faces in the top here. Henley here is had some good weeks, which is new name to the fray. He's got obviously through the 3 games, he's got a 22 tackles, and then he's got the 2 sacks plus the 1 INT. So he's gotten his fair share of activity on the defensive side of the ball. So that is where we're at with the IDP. Let's just take a quick look before we wrap up here on the, well, you know what? We'll just do a quick draft recap because that's always interesting to look at. And if you look at, this is the league that I run, the first 2 rounds, we'll just look at it. I mean, Chase here is battling the quarterback injury. Justin Jefferson's battling quarterback problems. Gibbs just hasn't really dialed up quite yet. CeeDee Lamb hurt. Barkley has been rather quiet. McCaffrey, a nice hit. Genty has been just a whiffaroo. I mean, that has just been a terrible first-round pick, but he's got no line to speak of. Neighbors is still trying to figure out his quarterback situation. Henry's had a couple of fumbles, big week 1, kind of throttled down. A-Chain has been pretty solid. Taylor, obviously, we mentioned him. Collins has quarterback issues because they have no line. Jacobs has been quiet, but, all right. His stats through a couple of games, he's had 14, 14, and 12. So just what you thought out of Jacobs, which was slow and steady. Brown, disaster. Thomas, a disaster. Brian Thomas, he's got there was a little bit of concern in me about Brian Thomas and that it wasn't the real deal last week. And I kind of put it by the wayside, and I ended up drafting him everywhere because I had a lot of picks toward the end of the first round, and he just lined up to be there. And so I jumped on it, and I picked him up pretty much everywhere I could. And through 3 games, I wish I had just listened to my gut instinct because I'd have to go back and see who I could have drafted other than him. But here in this case, I picked him up here. I could have went with Drake London. I could have went with Brock Bowers. Obviously, Bowers is hurt with the knee. I could have went Bucky Irvin. I could have went Trey McBride. Trey McBride through a couple of games, obviously solid 12, 13, and 15. But, the questions I had about Thomas ended up looking like they came true. Chase Brown, another whiff-a-rooney in the first 2 weeks. He has just been horrific for the Bengals. 13, 9, and 6 for my end of the second round pick. Not what you wanted to see. So now we will flip over to the games this week. We'll just run down the slate and see what catches our eye. The Thursday night game, Seahawks Cardinals. Who cares about that one? I think the Seahawks should win that game, and I think should cover that 1.5. We'll get into that hopefully with my brother tomorrow if we can get a Let's Bet show up. But other than that, I think there are 4 o'clock games. Everything else is at the 1 o'clock game. You obviously have the early 9:30 game between the Vikings and the Steelers. That is overseas, so at least you get a little bit of football in the morning on Sunday. Vikings favored there abroad by 2.5, so home game for the Steelers, but not really. Then you have a nice 3-0 battle between the Eagles and the Buccaneers. None of these other games, nothing catches my eye here. Jackson Dart with the Giants taking on the Chargers. Rams Colts is going to be a good one. This is the 4 o'clock slate. 4 o'clock games. You got 2 good ones. Colts versus Rams. Colts currently dogs by 3.5 on the road. And then the other one will be the Ravens and the Chiefs. While both of these teams are 1 and 2, they're obviously 2 strong AFC contenders. And I just noticed that none of you have been able to see what I've been doing because I did not share this tab. Oh, God, it's just,
You're cracking my balls, man.
No, I'm not.
You're an idiot.
You are a stupid asshole.
That's exactly what he is.
So, if you've been listening, with your ears, you've been able to follow along. But if you have been, watching here, on TV, you have not. So I think this is what happened when you try to go too long. And here I've been going 53 minutes. So I'll just wrap up now that I actually have it pulled up. And actually, the draft recap that I pulled up, that didn't show either because I forgot that I had to hit the change tabs. So this is how not to do podcasting 101. But as the clock is turned over, it's not even Tuesday anymore. It's Wednesday. So a new day is upon us coming up. So, like I said, Ravens, Chiefs, that game is at 4 o'clock. A battle of 1 and 2 teams. To think that one of these teams is going to be 1 and 3 it's kind of awe-inducing, but that is going to be the case unless they tie, and then they'll be 1, 2, and 1. Then you got Bears, Raiders games. Who cares about? Nah. Who cares about that? Who cares about Packers, Cowboys? And then you got two stinky Monday night games. These Monday night doubleheaders, you got to do away with these. Jets, Dolphins, and Bengals at the Broncos. Who cares? So, yet again, the NFL, is not lined up, and it's not really their fault, but, you need some of these teams to perform a little bit better when you're going to put out these double Monday night double games, the double headers, but that's going away anyway. So who really cares? But a rough week of games, if you're looking at it, obviously, if you're the fan of a team, you're going to watch them anyway. But, you got three biggies kind of Rams, Colts. You got the Chiefs, Ravens, and then you have Eagles, Bucks, 3-0 games. Those are the big three. So, all right, enough. I've rambled 50 minutes. I was hoping to actually do like a 30-minute, podcast here. It did not happen because I just do not know how to throttle this stupid mouth. It's just, oh my God.
What an idiot!
Fuck! So anyway, all the best to you guys. I will call it a wrap. As always, thanks for listening. Hope you had a little something out of the show. Probably not, especially toward the end there. But there's always next time. And so until then, remember, bet safe? I don't know. I'm thinking of something to say. I can't think of anything. Addy 5000. Peace.